Okay, everybody, I have 1 o'clock, so let's get started. First of all, let's just say October, huh? I mean, we're only in the 5th day of October, and I know it feels like we're already in spring. October is a busy month for assessment. The purpose of this meeting today is to go over some of the important information regarding the ACT non-college reportable October 21st administration. My name is Kathy Sierra. I'm a supervisor with the Office of Student Assessment, and I'll be your district contact for this administration as well as any of the ACT, SAT school days. So in addition to the national Saturday administrations of ACT and SAT, they also offer school day administrations throughout the school year. We will be having our first district-wide ACT non-college reportable administration for this school year on October 21st. This administration is for any senior who still requires a concordance score, either for ELA, math, or both. It is funded for the district for eligible seniors enrolled in traditional schools using Miami-Dade County ESSER funds. Charter schools can, of course, participate, but they would need to use their own ESSER funds. For ACT non-college reportable administrations, all students are allowed extended time. ELL students may use an ACT-approved word-to-word bilingual dictionary. Schools do not need to apply for these supports for the non-college reportable administration like they do for the college reportable administration. The supports are automatic. So as such, these scores are not reportable. They may not be used for scholarship consideration or college entrance. There are other SAT and ACT, both college reportable and non-college reportable opportunities throughout the school year. We have them posted on our testing calendar. Please note that this district-wide administration, and then we have one in the spring for SAT for all juniors. We'll be coordinating that with you. All of the others, schools would enter into a contract with ACT on their own or with the College Board, and they would order their own materials and have to pay for the administration. This is from the Department of Education's website regarding graduation requirements. It is a table of concordant and comparative scores for the high school graduation test. Please note that the requirements have changed for students in the 18-19 cohort. To meet concordance in ELA for ACT, students must score an average of at least 18 on the English and reading subtest. Prior to the this cohort, 18-19 cohort, students only needed to take the reading subtest, but now they need to take the English and the reading. The scores from those two subtests are averaged, and the student must get at least an 18. The score is rounded up, so if the average ends in a 0.5, it is rounded up to the next whole number. And results are superscored, which means the highest score of each subtest is averaged. To meet the comparative score for Algebra 1, students must score at least a 16 on the ACT math subtest. This is the schedule of activities for this test. So the deadline came very early this year to submit the pre-ID for the October test. So on August 27th, and I realized that was the first week of school, what I did is I went in and I pre-ID'd any senior who still had not met either the reading or math or both graduation tests. I uploaded that into Pearson. I realize at this point the list might look a little different, being that you probably have, you've had some no-shows, you've had some withdrawals, you've had students enter your building, you've probably even had students who have met concordance, but perhaps their score was not in SPY yet. So I'll be talking about what you need to do to make sure your rosters are accurate. So anyway, that's how I did the list for the initial book order. You have up until even after the date of the test to shore up your rosters. You can enroll and unenroll students as needed. The week of August 30th, I sent out your access for Pearson. Pearson would be the platform in which you would manage the test activities, and that's where you would need to go to check your student rosters. All of you should have access to Pearson. If you don't, please email me, but what I did was I gave access to every either school assessment coordinator or ACT/SAT school contact access to Pearson. This week, you can order additional materials. Now, ACT is different than College Board. You do not need to decrease your test book order. So if you ended up unenrolling a bunch of students and now you're going to be getting too many books, that's okay. They do not invoice by the amount of test books. They invoice by the students enrolled in Pearson. This week, up until Friday, if you do need to order additional materials, you can go into Pearson and do that. Friday would be the last day to order additional materials. I think now you guys are starting to receive your test materials. They're coming this week and next. I saw a bunch of schools were receiving them today. So be on the lookout for your ACT materials. Once they arrive, you do have some information to give to your students regarding preparing for the ACT, so make sure those go out to students. They need to set up their My ACT account, which I'll talk about in a minute. But all that can, as soon as you get the materials, you can get that information out to your students. So the actual test date is October 21st, but ACT has a very flexible non-college reportable administration. You are allowed to test over multiple dates. So the main administration day is October 21st, that's a Thursday. But notice the window, you can test up until the 25th. So that would be Thursday the 21st. You can also test on Friday the 22nd, no weekends. And then you could test on Monday the 25th. So you really have 3 days of testing if you want to. That's a school site decision. If you'd rather get everything done in one day, you absolutely can. But if you would like to test your students over multiple days, that's an option for you too. October 25th would be the last day that you guys can make sure that your rosters are cleaned up. You want to unenroll students who didn't show up for testing, and that way we won't be invoiced for them. You have until the 28th of October to get the materials out of your building, and then by November 1st, all materials need to be back to ACT. And by the way, if you guys have questions, please just go ahead and type them in the chat. And what I'll do is periodically, I'll just stop. It's just me today, but I'll stop and answer whatever questions you have. All right, so let's talk about general information and resources. Those of you that are school assessment coordinators are well aware of this resource. You're responsible for reviewing the resources provided by ACT. In addition, you should download and refer to the MDCPS standards, guidelines, and procedures for test administration and security. These are our district-wide guidelines for administrations of high-stake assessments to ensure security and the validity of results. All right, let's talk about some resources. ACT has a jam-packed resource page. By the way, all of those are direct links. When you get your PowerPoint, you can just click on all of those links and go directly to them. But I will also put a link to the district page. Hold on. There we go. Okay, the link that I just put in the chat is the ACT district testing page there. That's where all your manuals are, information, forms, resources, and it's split up into sections. There's 7 sections. 1, 2, and 3 I pretty much already done for you. That's your student upload, which I already did for you. Your request for accommodations, your enroll, unenroll template, which I've already forwarded to you. 4 has to do with students and signing up for My ACT. There are resources there, but you're going to get them in your materials as well. And then 5 is probably the one where you're going to use the most. That's where all your manuals are. That's where your calculator policy is, your word-to-word dictionary list, all of that is there. 6 has to do with packing everything up. There's step-by-step instructions, but those are also going to be included when you get your shipment of materials. And then 7 is for reporting. This is the reporting site for ACT. If you are the school assessment coordinator or the counselor or the CAP advisor, the registrar, you should have access to this. So what you need to do is go to success.act.org if you don't have an account, and click on the Create Account. You're going to enter in the information, and then it's going to ask you what level of access that you want. There's 3 levels of access. There's Trusted Agent. The trusted agent really should go to either the principal or the designee. It's the person who would manage access for everyone else at the school. A second level is the online reporting, and that's anyone can, or the person has online reporting can go in and download score reports, both college reportable and non-college reportable for students enrolled at their school. And then the third access is TAA, and that would be for the person who submits accommodations for ELL and your SPED. So it's possible for someone to have all 3, but the most common, honestly, are the online reporting. Like I said, if you're a counselor, CAP advisor, all of the student services should have access to this. It is the easiest way to submit a score for concordance scores. If a student's score is not in SPY yet, come into ACT, you download the report, and then you just attach it to the email, send it to concordancescores@dadeschools.net, and then I'm actually the person who gets those score reports, and I can enter it for you. It is an official score report, so you can send that to me, and it's no problem. And then there's Pearson Access Next. This is the platform where you're going to be conducting your test day activities or leading up to the test. So everyone should have access to this. It's where you're going to see the roster of pre-ID'd students that I uploaded. It's also where you're going to check on your counts for materials. And like I said, prior to sending off your materials back to ACT, you want to make sure that you've unenrolled students who did not end up testing. And these are your user guides and manuals that you're going to need for this administration. Again, on the slide is a direct link to Section 5. We've got the test coordinator manual, the test administration manual, and the Pearson Access Next guide. I'll be honest, the Pearson Access Next guide, I've been sending you guys emails with step-by-steps. I grabbed it directly from there. I figured it was easier. Let me give you the information rather than you hunting it down yourself. But definitely the test coordinator manual and the test administration manual, I'm only going to scratch the surface of what is going to be needed for test day. You need to make sure that you have those resources and you go through them. And remember, you will receive actual hard copies in your shipment of materials. You will receive enough test administration manuals. I think the ratio is for every 10 tests, they send a manual. So you'll have plenty of manuals to give to your test administrators. Each one of them should have a copy. And as I'm going through this, I will be referring to, well, you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, either the test coordinator manual and a page number, the test administrator manual and a page number, and Pearson Access Next and a page number, basically where you can find that information in the manuals. ACT refers to the person who is coordinating the activity for the ACT administration as the test coordinator. They also refer to the test administrator as the room supervisor. So I've been sending out periodic reminders for you guys to go into Pearson and verify your roster. Remember, the pre-ID that I submitted was submitted on August 27th. I realize that your school probably has changed a bit since then. You might still have seniors who have concordance scores, and when I get to the end of the presentation, I'll go over to make sure you know how to submit if they have a qualifying concordance score. Maybe they tested last spring, the SAT school day, maybe they tested over the summer. I'm the person who enters the score, so I'm going to tell you right now, there's no rhyme or reason how those files come or in what order they come. I know you guys are used to, there's an FSA administration within 6 to 8 weeks. All of the scores are input. It's not the way it works with SAT, and ACT. It comes in dribs and drabs, and one day we'll get a file with 100 students, and then 2 weeks later we'll get a file with 4,000 students. And in that file could be administrations from last month or from 6 months ago. So as soon as we get those files, they're cleaned up by IT, and then they're uploaded into SPI. And then if you notice, after about 6 weeks or so, a student has tested and the score is not in SPI, that's when you submit the score to me at concordantscores@dadeschools.net, and I'll go over that. So the procedure for adding and deleting students in Pearson is to enroll and unenroll students. It's kind of cumbersome. You have to submit an Excel spreadsheet to ACT, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 days for them to either enroll or unenroll. And all the information has to be on there or they won't do it. If you're having any questions or any issues with it, please let me know and I can help. So some of your responsibilities in addition to managing Pearson is you're going to need to assign students to a testing room, designate and train staff to serve as test administrators, proctors, and hall monitors if needed. Upon receipt of the materials, you'll need to make sure that they are secured and accounted for, and you're going to need to supervise test sessions on test day and perform all the necessary closeout activities for testing. All right, I wanted to talk about this really quickly. I know a lot of you are school assessment coordinators and you've just gone through retakes, so you've already probably have your rosters and you know where to get them from. But for those of you who maybe are not as familiar with File Download Manager, I wanted to show you something. So I know you know the basics, the student demographic information and all your basic stuff that you would choose. I want to show you this, the graduation field, which some people know about it, some people don't. It's a very quick and easy way to figure out who has met the graduation test requirement and who hasn't. This field is under program. Now notice, there is the math graduation requirement flag, and then underneath that, all the different ways a student can meet that requirement. And then there's the reading graduation flag, and then all the different ways a student can meet that requirement. In addition to, here's FSA ELA reading, and here's FSA Algebra 1 EOC. So I find the easiest thing is to get that first. And let me show you what it looks like in an Excel. When you download it, I've highlighted those two fields. Here's the math graduation requirement flag, and here's the reading. It'll be Y, meaning yes, if the student has met that requirement, and then blank if the student hasn't. If the student has met the requirement, it'll tell you how. If you just go across this student right here, if you see these are, these are their attempts at those tests. So this student attempted the SAT math, did not meet the concordance score requirement. On their PSAT, they did not meet the concordance score requirement. So how did they meet it? If you go all the way over here, they met it with PERT. So obviously this is a student from a 17-18 cohort because PERT is no longer used beginning with the 18-19 cohort and forward. Obviously anybody with a blank has not met the requirements. So those of you that are used to using Excel, grab a list, filter your blanks, and that will tell you which tests that they. Okay, let's talk about the order of materials. The initial order was based on the pre-ID file that I submitted in August. You can check to see the status of your order by going into Pearson, clicking Setup, Orders and Shipment Tracking, and then just clicking on the I, and you can actually see what materials are coming, and there's even a tracking number where you can click on to see what day they're going to be there. If you ended up unenrolling a bunch of students and you have more materials coming than you need, don't worry, you do not need to decrease your test order. But if you added students and you're going to need more test booklets, you must order you must place an additional order by Friday, so that has to be done by Friday. And remember, ACT will invoice by the number of students enrolled in Pearson and not the number of test books used. And let's talk about the sequence of administration. I know this is what you want to hear. For ACT, you must follow the order of administration. So think of it as alphabetical order. So test 1 needs to be English, then math, then reading, then science. But the student need only take the tests that they need. You're allowed to skip sections. So let's be honest, no one's going to be taking science because science is not needed for concordance. So your students are going to be taking English, math, reading, either all of them or some of them. So let's talk about first, a student who needs ELA concordance. They only need ELA. They already have their math. They only need ELA. They need to take the English and the reading in that order. A student who only needs math would only take the math. They could skip everything else. Now, a student who needs both, and listen carefully, I know how your brain is working because mine would have done that too. Let's say you had students who needed both. You might say, I know I'll do an ELA day and a math day. You can't, because a student who needs both, think about it, they need the English, the math, and the reading, and it must be administered in that order. First English, then math, then reading. You can still test over multiple days. Some of you might want to do one subject per day. Some of you might want to do 2 sections one day and then a section another day. You can do that, but you must follow the order. And the order is, it's the administration is for the student, not for the school. So you can, on a day, like a student who needs ELA, you can have students doing their ELA and reading in one room and students who only need math doing their math in another room. But the order of administration goes by the student. Is there a test administration manual for students who need only one section, or should we adapt those? So when you administer the test, your test administrator is only going to read for the sections that is needed. To clarify, if a student only needs reading, they do not answer math or science. That is correct. So if the student only needs reading, and I'm going to call it ELA because I don't want people to get confused, because there is a subtest called reading. So if a student only needs the ELA graduation test requirement, remember they have to take both the English and the reading in that order. They can skip math, they can skip science. And then one more time, a student who needs both ELA and math needs to take first test English, then math, then reading. Just think of it as alphabetical order. SPED students who were added to the ACT test, but they have received waivers for state assessment, therefore they should be removed. If they already have a waiver in place, in other words, they've already attempted the FSA, then yes, they don't need to test if they already have a waiver in place. If I have extra books, can I use those books plus enroll them? Absolutely. So you can order more books if you have students who qualify who need to test. Remember, you have until Friday to do that. And remember, you're the one determining who tests by who is enrolled in your school. So you're going to need to go into Pearson, unenroll students who aren't going to test, and enroll students who are. And remember that the unenroll part can be done after the test. You just want to make sure you've got your students enrolled, because the students are going to need to bubble in their ACT ID, or actually you're going to need to bubble in their ACT ID prior to the test. For the employer option on the successact.org, do we choose our school or MDCPS and the region? Oh, that's a really good question. Thank you. Choose your school. So when you're going into the ACT, the success.act.org, and by the way, somebody had asked what that website is. That's the website right there for the ACT reporting. Choose your school, not Miami-Dade. A student who needs ELA and math can test over 3 days with each section. Yes. So remember, guys, there's 3 days of administration. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can get everything done in 1 day, 2 day, or 3 day. But I've been talking to some schools and they said, well, let's do a section a day. And they'll do English 1 day, math another, and reading the next day. All right, let's talk about timing. So students can have time and a half, double time, or triple time. It is up to you what you want to do with your school. Once you go into double or triple time and the student needs to take multiple sections, then most likely you are going to need to test on multiple days, because you won't be able to get done in 1 day. You cannot carry over a section into another day. So if you start a section 1 day, it needs to be finished that day. Let me pause for a second, and I want to make sure I'm getting your questions. Is it acceptable for one room to be doing English and reading on one day because a student needs FSA ELA, with another room doing English and math one day, but leaves the reading for the second day? Yes. Remember, the sequence of administration would go for the student, not the school. So if a student, you just have to make sure if a student needs both sections, if a student needs both ELA and math, the order of administration needs to be alphabetical order. So English, math, reading. I understand that the science section should be skipped. Is there an example of a student who will take the science section? The purpose of this administration is for concordance scores. There are no science concordance scores. You can administer the science to the student, but I don't see why you would. I would skip the science. Can we mix double and triple time for a group of students who need both? Yes. Again, it is, here I'm going to go back. And I've had discussions with some of you about this, that maybe you want to do triple time for math and double time for English and reading. It's completely a school site decision. But timing guidelines don't have to apply to all tests. You can have different timing guidelines per test. You do what works for your students. But one thing to consider, this is not like retake testing where you give them the standard time and then they're allowed to leave. For ACT, if you're giving triple time, you hold the student the entire time. So they have to sit for the entire allotted time. So those are things to consider. Can we test students that only need math in the same room with students that need only FSA? I'm not sure I understand that question. But you want to make sure you group your students by timing guideline and by test. That way the directions are all the same. Okay, and then this is just, there's a lot of flexibility with this test. You guys know your students best. Do what's best for your population and what you think will be the best use of their time. And again, you can administer over 3 days, you can administer over 1 day, you can administer over 2 days, and then you can use any of those timing guidelines that you like. Okay, and as I stated, you want to make sure you group your rosters or group your students by the test and by the timing guideline. It helps also to group them by accommodation, so you wouldn't mix your ELL students in with standard curriculum students because the dictionaries might be distracting. You're allowed to, but I think, follow what we've always done, and we group by accommodation. Page 31 of the test coordinator manual has the student to test administrator ratio. You can create your own rosters, your own seating charts, but ACT also has their administration forms that will need to be completed. When you're preparing your rooms, remember, choose rooms that are well lit and ventilated. Desks need to be at least 3 feet apart, facing the same direction. Test administrators should be facing examinees. Instructional materials must be covered or taken down, and there must be a visible working clock. And the test administrator should also have a timepiece that they're consulting. All right, let me do some more questions because I know you got a lot. What if we decide to allow a student time and a half, but they're still working at that time limit? Can we switch double time during the test administration? That's a good question. If you do that, it would have to be for the whole room. But let me consult with ACT about that. All right, so your test materials, you'll be receiving them, if not this week, next week, probably in the next couple days. When they arrive, they must immediately go into and remain in locked storage. Only the test coordinator and individuals that are helping with the preparation of materials have access to the test materials. The test coordinator must verify the materials within the packing list within 24 hours of receipt. You want to make sure you check the serial number ranges on the test books. They need to match the packing list. Any discrepancies, your first phone call is to ACT, the next one is to me. So if there's any kind of breach, any kind of materials are missing, anything like that, your first phone call is to ACT because they will tell you what your next step is, and then I need to be notified. So in the event of items are missing from your shipment, a test book has been stolen, a test book, the seal was broken prior to administration, call ACT and then call me. So you need to identify and train staff. You want to use your teachers. You can use retired teachers. For proctors, you can use substitute teachers, clerical employees, paraprofessionals. Proctors are there to basically serve as an extra set of eyes and ears during the test administration, but the test coordinator or the test administrator is the one who's actually performing all of the activities. Be sure to include these topics in your training, you know, where they're going to pick up the materials on test day, what sections they're going to administer. So make sure you have a meeting with them talking about, because this is a little different than what we're used to, what sections they're going to be administering and the timing of these sections. What script they're going to be reading. Remember, every test administrator is going to have their own book. Things like how to admit the test takers into the room, the procedure they need to go to, and the process for seating examinees. You want to go over the policy for watches and cell phones, electronic devices, basically what your school policy is going to be. Each test administrator must have a copy of the script, and they must read the script verbatim. Verbal instructions must begin no later than 9 a.m. So if you look at your test administrator manual, I think it's on page 50, it's called verbal instructions. That's when the students have come in, they've been seated, materials haven't been passed out yet. At that point, don't admit any more students into the room, and this needs to be done by 9 a.m. Students may not leave when they are done. They must be given the entire allotted time. And of course, they can't move on to other sections. So in the case where you are testing over multiple days, you need to make sure that students don't go back to sections that are previously finished. Make sure that the test administrators know to inform you of any irregularities, and they need to make sure that the test materials are in a secure location as examinees enter and exit the room, and obviously actively monitor the test administration. Okay, let me see what questions you have. For ACT, is there a specific starting time that the testing groups must start by? So 9 a.m., everyone needs to be in the room by 9 a.m. If it's going to be much later than 9 a.m., I believe you need to call ACT. If all students in a room are finished before their scheduled time, can they leave? No, they cannot. No. Remember, the way this test goes, each section is timed. They cannot move on to another section if they finish a section early. So if they're given double time for a section, they have to stay in that section for the entire allotted time. If they're done early, they cannot leave. They cannot move on to another section. And be careful with that because ACT is strict. There's a form that your test administrators need to fill out while students are testing, even to the point where they indicate the time and where the student leaves off on the section, and ACT checks everything. In the test manual, there will be different scripts to read. Which one should be read? I'm going to have to look. As far as I know, there's only one script, and it depends on what section or what test you're administering. Even if all the students in the room are done, yes. The script has to start by 9 a.m. So what I'm saying is that according to ACT, all testing must begin by 9 a.m. If it's going to be later than that, then you need to let ACT know, because remember, this is a national, nationally administered test, so they want everyone starting around the same time. You guys will receive a pre-ID barcode label for every student that was uploaded through the pre-ID file that I uploaded on August 27th. So for all those students, you're going to receive a label. Any student you added after August 27th, you won't have a label for. But don't worry, there's not a lot of bubbling. All you need to do prior to test day is go into Pearson Access. When you go into Pearson Access and you click on students, you'll see your student roster loaded. The very first column is called student code, and that is what needs to be bubbled in block J on the student's answer sheet. On the morning of the test, students need to complete blocks A through G in their answer document. The test administrator will read the directions on page 47 of the test administration manual. You are going to have, or you may have, some special program students coming to your school. I sent out an email September 16th that there were some Miami-Dade virtual school students that might be testing at your school. I emailed you guys the roster. I've already ordered materials for them, and they already have a label coming. The only thing that you need to do for their answer document is, please, in section K, bubble in the school code for Miami-Dade Virtual School 977305. You don't need to do that for your other students because they'll be identified through the ACT ID, but for your special program students, please make sure that that code is bubbled. The parents will most likely be contacting you probably this week. They need to contact you by Friday, and you tell them what day to come and what time to come for testing. Okay, question about, can we start earlier than 9 a.m.? Yes, absolutely. I'm just saying that ACT says everyone needs to start by 9 a.m. So you can start earlier than that. Since it's non-reportable, pre-admin is not necessary. This is not like SAT, where there's a colossal amount of information that the student needs to fill in. Let me go back to the only information on test day that students will need to fill in are blocks A through G, and that's their basic demographic information. They can do their more detailed information through the My ACT. It's online, and you'll have those instructions with your materials when you get them. But the morning of the test, there shouldn't be that much that the student needs to do. Okay, this is the information for My ACT. It's in section 4 of that district testing page. And again, the actual paper materials will come to you with your shipment, and you can give those out to students. They do not have to do this. This is a non-college reportable administration, so they're not going to be reporting their scores to colleges. They can set up a My ACT account if they want to, but you'll be the one getting their scores when you go into the ACT Success portal. One good thing about this is if they create the My ACT account, they will have access to a practice ACT, so that's good. You'll need to alert your students of the ACT electronic device policy prior to the test, and they have a watch policy. Examinees are not allowed to wear a watch during administration. If they have a watch, they need to take it off and put it on the desk. The link on the slide, ACT, what to bring on test day, if you have a way to electronically communicate with your students, you might want to send them that link. It's kind of a do and don't, what to bring and what not to bring on ACT. And then there's also a link to a prohibited device poster, but you'll also be getting it in your shipment of materials. Do students need to create a My ACT account like last year? No. They don't, but like I said, they will have access to a practice ACT if they do, but no, it's not dependent on them getting a score. You're going to be the ones who are going to get the score. Remember, this is for non-college reportable, and it's recognized that you might go with time and a half, double time, triple time, so you would have to indicate the time for your test administrators, which is important why you should go over all this with your test administrators. Okay, here is the ACT authorized calculators and dictionary policy. Again, that's in section 5 of the ACT district testing page. But those are also direct links in the PowerPoint. And this is information, again, prior to tests, you want to make sure your students have this information. So you're going to prepare materials for testing. You're going to have a roster. You want to make sure that the tests are in sequential order. You want to make sure that your answer documents are pre-identified. And you want to make sure that you have test administration forms for your test administrators. Those will be included in your shipment of materials. Also give them calculators and dictionaries as needed, and then of course pencils. So there are some required forms for ACT. They have the ACT testing staff list, and that's just a paper where you're going to list all the staff you use for testing. There is a test room report. That is something that you and the test administrator fill out the morning of. The roster, again, that can be school created. ACT included a roster. You can just staple your school created roster to that roster. There's a seating diagram, not to be confused with seating chart. You might have a seating chart, but there's an actual seating diagram that needs to be filled out by the test administrator the morning of the test. And then there's the timing report. And then of course, irregularity reports if needed. Okay, so test day. You want to make sure you allow enough time for test administrators to pick up their test materials. They need to verify the count, so make sure what you're giving them, they count and sign for. Test administrators need to make sure that at all times materials are out of reach from students. Make sure you go over when students can no longer be admitted into the testing room. Verbal instructions need to begin by 9 a.m. And please make sure that they understand to read the script verbatim and understand whatever timing guidelines you have. You can allow breaks as indicated in the script. Students may not access their personal belongings until the test is over and materials have all been collected. So during a break, you need to make sure, the test administrator needs to make sure that they monitor the student, that no one is going into their personal belongings. Testing irregularities may include missing or stolen materials, misconduct, staff mistiming. You're going to follow the directions, and there's a form that you and the test administrator need to complete, but there's prompts and what to do on pages 33 to 38 of the test administration manual. If something happens and there needs to be a testing irregularity and you need to contact ACT, again, call them first and then let me know what's going on. All right, so let's talk about preparing your materials for return. Basically, you're going to follow whatever directions ACT has. They're going to include in their shipment of materials directions for you to return everything. Everything obviously must be accounted for at the end of each day of testing. If you're testing over multiple days, you need to make sure you have all the material returned to you at the end of each day of testing. Once you get all the test books back, you want to arrange them in sequential order. You want to make sure you account for all answer documents. You want to make sure that every answer document has their ACT ID bubbled in. I know that's going to take some time, so they'll either have the label on there. If they don't have a label, their ACT ID needs to be bubbled in. You want to make sure that the reporting of scores is accurate. Make sure that the school code is bubbled for any special program students, and verify that all the test administration forms have been completed. So you have until October 25th to remove students who did not test from Pearson Access. There's a template that I had sent you guys. What you're going to do is you're going to complete that template and then submit it through Pearson Access. If you're having trouble, let me know and I can walk you through it. You're responsible for following the directions regarding packing the test materials and completing and returning all the required documentation and arranging for pickup of materials. Instructions for arranging pickup of materials will be included in your shipment of materials. Takes, I want to say, non-college reportable is even longer. It might take 8 to 10 weeks, but slowly we'll be getting a report of scores. Like I said before, the way it works is the file, it comes to us, it's cleaned up by ITS, and then it's loaded into SPI. But I will work with you on making sure all of those score reports are entered into SPI. If you have any seniors right now who have concordant scores, here, let me write the email address in here. If you have any seniors that have concordant scores, make sure you send a copy of their score report to concordantscores@dayschools.net with their MDCPS ID, and I will enter it into SPI. Weekly briefing 23052 and 23095 give directions on how to submit it, but I think all of you know by now how to do that. All right. Will test administration follow their scripts from the test coordinator manual like on Saturday exams, or are all the manual scripts, seating charts, etc., be on paper? The scripts are in the test administration manual. The required forms are going to be included in your shipment of materials. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Sebastian. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself.
Can you give the website again for where we send the concordant scores?
Of course. It's an email address, and I'm going to... Okay, I put it in the chat. So if a student has a concordant score, just make sure you attach. And by the way, one thing I do want to caution you. I know sometimes a student will forward you a concordant score. It needs to be verified by staff members. So if somebody has gone into ACT or the College Board and downloaded the score report, that's fine, but I cannot accept a score report that's been forwarded directly from the student and has not been verified by anyone at the school. Any other questions?
Yes, Kathy, it's Sebastian.
Hey, hey Sebastian.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I really want to clarify, like, so if we have a whole room of kids that are testing, let's say, I have a couple of questions, but if they're all testing in the math section, so they don't need to go through the English section. So the teacher will, the test supervisor will, the room supervisor will only read the script for math.
Right. So you're saying in that room, those kids are only needing to take the math because they've already met reading concordance, right?
I guess so. Yeah. So my question was, so I guess you recommend that we split the rooms and not have, for example, let's say I have a kid that only needs the math section, and then I also have another kid that needs only the English and the reading section, right? For the FSA concordance, they need to take both. So you're suggesting that we should split those kids into different rooms? Well,
because if you do this, let's say you put all those kids together. You have kids that only need reading and kids that only need math.
Yeah, the script will be different.
Well, it's number one, the script will be different, but you can't give different scripts to kids in the room. So you'd have to have the math kid just sit there while the ELA is going on. So
correct.
Right. So my recommendation, well, really what you need to do is, yes, you would need to split those kids up. Right. Exactly.
And then the timing issue, because I always thought that as long as one student is still testing, you have to keep the testing going. But what if they've all finished?
Let me get clarification, Sebastian. And here's the thing.
Especially with all this timing issue that you can add more time or less, it's like.
Well, let me get clarification from ACT.
Okay.
And I'll let you know. All
right. Thank you.
Good to talk to you.
I have a question about the file download.
Mm-hmm.
Mentioned it. Sorry. I don't see the graduation flag option. Is that coming later, or is that?
No, it's there. Here, let me go into it and show it to you guys. All right. So obviously, I'm just going to hit Student Basic for demographic. It's under Program. Click on Graduation. I'm going to hit Load, and it's right here. Math Graduation Requirement Flag, and then Reading Graduation Requirement Flag. This will save you so much time. Because I know a lot of people, they go straight to assessments and download all that, but you don't need to know the scores, right? You just need to know whether they qualify or not. So it's just a straight yes or no. So I think this is a much cleaner way to look at it. And for your counselors, let them know about this. It's got the community service hours, the online graduation requirement, whether they've met that or not. So this is a great little quickie report that you can get.
Perfect. Thank you. I did see it. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Great.
Miss Sierra?
Yeah.
If we have kids that are taking multiple portions, can they break for lunch and then come back?
No. They're not allowed. The only time you're allowed to have an extended break is before the writing test, and you guys are not going to be taking writing.
Okay.
So there is no extended break. The longest break they can have is 15 minutes.
So we're going to have to do multiple days.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you are going with the double or triple time, yeah, you're going to have to do multiple days.
Okay, and standard time is not an option.
Well, why have them do standard time? This is a non-college reportable, so take advantage of the extended time. You can always do time and a half. If you want to get this done in one day, do time and a half.
Okay.
Just separate your rooms by those that need ELA, those that need math, and those that need both.
Okay.
Gonna do.
I
Hi,
don't know what's
Kathy.
happening in the world.
Go ahead.
Hi, Kathy.
Hey, Rosa.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I have so I have two questions. The time so the extended time, we don't have to separate the accommodated group, correct?
All right. Can you give me your email address?
Say that again.
We
I'm
don't-
sorry.
We
Wait, hold
don't
on.
have to.
Go ahead.
We don't have to separate the ESOL and the IEPs.
No,
We
think
won't
of
have
it
to
this
separate
way.
them.
You're basically you're going to group them by the test they're taking and the time they're getting. It's a little cleaner if you can separate them by ELL and SPED, but you don't have to. So the most important thing is everyone in that room is taking the same test and having the same time allotted.
Okay, and when you mention the double timing, the triple timing, is just an option we choose, or is that based on their accommodation? No.
It's totally up to you. It can be based on their accommodation, but it's a school site decision as to which timing guideline you want to go to. You could absolutely justify it by saying, well, this student is used to getting double time for a test. And that's how they do PSAT and SATs.
Yeah. Okay, and then my last question, as a charter school, can I test at the beginning of the window, which is the 19th and 20th?
Yeah, you're allowed. Your contract allows you to test beginning on the 19th. Ours doesn't. We have to start on the 21st. So you can start on the 19th.
Okay, thank you so much, Kathy.
Sure. Okay, guys, more questions?
One last question.
Sure.
If now that I remember that you said that we can test on multiple days, at least 3 days total. So if I have absent students on the 21st, I could potentially.
Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't. Yes, you can absolutely make them up. So let's say you have a kid that missed the first 2 days, and you want to make sure that they get the test, and just have them do time and a half on the last day.
Okay.
And you can get it all done in one day.
And we have up to until the 20. You said 26 or
25th. So you have 3 days of testing: the 21st, the 22nd, and the 25th. And guys, if it's too complicated, you don't have to spread it out over multiple days. Just do it all in one day, and just do time and a half over one day. You can do that.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Hey, Kathy, can you clarify the part about the extended break? Like, can they get breaks, and what constitutes an extended break?
Extended break is over 15 minutes, and an extended break is only allowed after before the writing test. So there are no extended breaks for this. So if you are,
Lunch has to be at the end, basically. I got it.
yeah, they can't go to lunch and come back.
Okay. And then just one little thing that like, I really liked how you showed all the fields and those flags in File Download Manager. They're awesome. Just wanted to mention that that average ACT looks at the non-college reportable and the regular, so they don't have to worry about like keeping track of which ones.
That's a good point. That's a great point. Thanks, Betty. Yeah, the super score works. It picks whatever the highest, no matter what administration, whatever the highest score is.
Yes, going back to the how many kids per testing room, since it's 1 to 20 for accommodated, since we are testing based off of actual tests, right, and not necessarily the accommodation, if we're mixing the standard kids with accommodated students, will we then go by the accommodated maximum number of students in that testing group?
I think, because technically this is an accommodated administration. So let me get that information for you. Let me write that down.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure. All right. So when you sign into Pearson, you're going to click on students. I don't have anything appearing because there's nobody enrolled for Dade County Public Schools. But if I went into one of your schools, a roster would pop up. But I don't want to do that because I don't want to share any student information. But this first column would be the student code, and that's what needs to be, if you don't have a label, what needs to be bubbled in block J, but I don't know about work key. And then to check your shipments, guys, go into orders and shipments, and then just click on the blue eye, and then it will tell you exactly what you're getting. Well, I'm going to hang around. Go ahead and log off. I'm always available. Email, call me, whatever you need, let me know. And if you think of something, just let me know. But I will hang around if anyone has any more questions. But otherwise, thank you so much for your attention.